I'll bet 10 million she fails, sneered the city's most powerful heiress, pointing at Stella Sue and her husband, the infamous freeloader Ian Pye. The entire business world laughed, eagerly piling on bets until $50 million were staked against them. Their company was on the verge of bankruptcy, and this conference was their public execution. Honey, Ian whispered to his terrified wife, our baby's formula money depends on them. He made a single phone call. Minutes later, the billionaire president of the Soaring Dragon Guild stormed into the hall, bowed to Ian, and announced a $500 million investment in Stella's company. Then, before the stunned crowd, Ian looked the billionaire in the eye. A generous offer, he said calmly. But for my wife, I'll only accept it for 1% of her company. The billionaire paled. Of course, Mr. Pye, as you wish. As 50 million in winnings flooded their account, Stella could only stare at the man everyone called a loser. Who are you? Ian just shrugged. Just a guy trying to earn some milk money. Chapter 46. Faced with Stella's shocked and inquisitive eyes, Ian simply shrugged, as if discussing something trivial. I just happened to hear about it. What? You've never heard of the Soaring Dragon Commerce Guild? Of course I have. Stella's tone was a mix of frustration and helplessness. But their investment standards are incredibly high. The Sue family has been rejected year after year, and this year, we didn't even receive an invitation. Without one, I can't even get into the venue, let alone compete for funding. The spark of hope in her eyes, just ignited, was quickly extinguished. It was like seeing a mirage in the desert. The greater the hope, the more bitter the disappointment. However, fate seemed to have a flair for the dramatic. Just as Stella finished speaking, a maid hurried over, respectfully holding out a heavy, crimson invitation card. Miss, a gentleman outside asked me to give this to you. Distraught, Stella took it impatiently and tossed it onto the sofa. She was in no mood for any banquets. But Zheng Li, catching a glimpse of the invitation's cover, gasped. She pointed at it, so excited she could barely speak. Miss Sue, the invitation. I know it's an invitation. What's wrong with you? Stella glanced at her, then followed her gaze to the striking red card. One look, and she froze, as if struck by lightning. The familiar emblem of a golden dragon was the unmistakable mark of the Soaring Dragon Commerce Guild. She snatched up the card, her fingers trembling with excitement as she tore it open. On the white inner page, her name was printed in clear, formal script, along with the time and place for the very investment conference she had been dreaming of. This is from the Soaring Dragon Commerce Guild. They invited me. Stella's voice was filled with incredulous joy. Seeing her elation, an imperceptible smile touched Ian's lips as he quietly turned and walked toward the dining room. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, the Qin family's living room was filled with smug satisfaction. An identical crimson invitation sat in the center of their coffee table. Brandon Hua, a bandage still wrapped around his head, sat with his legs crossed like a triumphant general, basking in the Qin family's admiration. Mr. Hua, is this really from the Soaring Dragon Commerce Guild? Jenna Yan's voice was shrill with excitement. Of course, Brandon said proudly. My father personally met with President Meng of the guild to get this for Jade. President Meng has already promised that the Qin group will get a project worth at least 100 million. Oh, that's wonderful. Jenna was overjoyed. Mr. Hua is so capable. Not like that worthless Ian Pye, who just freeloads. Jade, you must treat Mr. Hua well from now on. Jade took the invitation, her heart churning. It was Brandon's promise of this $100 million investment that had solidified her decision to divorce Ian. Now, with the invitation in hand, her last shred of doubt vanished. Ian, she thought silently, don't blame me. We were never from the same world. But just as hope and joy intertwined, a sudden crisis was quietly descending upon Stella. Near noon, her phone rang urgently. It was her mother, Evelyn, her voice frantic and choked with tears. Stella, it's terrible. Your brother Matthew is missing. We've looked everywhere and can't find him. Please, come help us look. Mom, what happened? How did Matthew get out? Stella's heart plummeted. Her younger brother, Matthew Sue, had suffered a head injury years ago that left him with the mind of a child. For his safety, the family kept him virtually confined to the house. The thought of him out alone was terrifying. After hanging up, Stella was a mess of anxiety. She rushed downstairs, grabbing Zheng Li to leave. Ian, just coming out of the washroom, immediately followed. I'll go with you. The car sped through the city, Stella anxiously pointing out directions, tears welling in her eyes. Ian, however, remained calm. Based on her description, he deduced that Matthew would likely follow his old habits, heading to his former school or a bookstore. After a fruitless search at the school, Stella was on the verge of breaking down. Ian comforted her as he drove to the next location. As they drove, Ian suddenly slowed down, frowning at the scene across the street. A crowd had gathered in front of a large restaurant, arguing about something. In the middle of it all, a figure with a bandaged head was particularly conspicuous. It was Brandon Hua. Beside him, Kevin Sheen was shoving a thin figure, who stumbled backward, his face filled with terror. It's Matthew! Stella cried out, instantly recognizing her missing brother. She threw the car door open and ran across the street, with Ian and Zheng Li right behind her. What they saw made Stella's blood boil. There was a clear red handprint on Matthew's face, his clothes were stained with melted ice cream, and Kevin Sheen had him by the collar, spewing insults. Are you blind? You bumped into me and thought you could just run off. Can you afford to replace these new clothes? Sister, Matthew sobbed when he saw Stella. He hit me, and he ruined my ice cream. Why did you hit him? Stella demanded, her voice shaking with rage. Kevin was initially intimidated, but Jenna Yin, standing nearby, shrieked. What are you afraid of her for? With Mr. Hua here, she's nothing. It was this idiot who ran into my son first. Emboldened, Kevin's attitude worsened. He started dragging Matthew toward a nearby trash can. An idiot still has to pay for my clothes. If you can't pay, I'll just throw you in the trash. Let me handle this. Ian's voice was ice cold. He gently patted Stella's trembling shoulder and stepped forward. Well, look at you, loser. Trying to be a hero? Kevin looked at him with contempt, poking a finger into his chest. Apologize to him, Ian said, his voice flat. Apologize to my. Before he could finish, a sharp crack echoed through the air. A resounding slap sent Kevin stumbling backward, his eyes wide with disbelief. Ian Pai, are you crazy? Jenna screamed, lunging forward. Ian shot her a look so cold it stopped her in her tracks. He turned back to Kevin and repeated, apologize. You dare hit me again. Kevin roared, throwing a punch. Ian moved first. He grabbed Kevin by the collar, and with a powerful heave, lifted him into the air. With a sickening thud and a muffled scream, Kevin was unceremoniously dumped headfirst into the foul-smelling trash can, leaving only his flailing legs visible. Chapter 47. Time seemed to freeze in front of the restaurant. Everyone stared, dumbfounded, at the pair of legs kicking frantically from inside the trash can. Jenna Yin and Brandon Hua, the future mother-in-law and son-in-law, were frozen in place, their faces masks of pure horror. A moment later, Jenna let out a piercing shriek. She and Brandon scrambled to pull Kevin out of the reeking bin. He emerged covered in sticky filth, a piece of rotten cabbage clinging to his hair, smelling to high heaven. Ian Pai, I'll kill you. Jenna went berserk, clawing at him like a wild animal. But Ian just stared at her, an immense, powerful aura erupting from him as he bellowed. Don't make me hurt you. His icy gaze and terrifying presence stopped her dead. She looked at this man in terror, a complete stranger. This was not the meek, submissive loser who had lived in her house. This was a demon forged in the depths of hell. Her first tactic having failed, Jenna resorted to another. She plopped down on the pavement and began to wail and flail, throwing a tantrum so theatrical and tearless that the onlookers began to snicker. Brandon looked at the scene, then at the bandage on his own head, and a fresh wave of hatred washed over him. He saw this as the perfect opportunity to impress his future mother-in-law in Jade. With a vicious glint in his eye, he grabbed a plastic traffic cone and swung it with all his might at Ian's head. Watch out, Stella screamed. But Ian didn't move, a strange smile playing on his lips. Just as the cone was about to connect, he swayed, ghost-like, dodging the attack, while his left hand tapped Brandon lightly on the waist. An imperceptible flicker of dark energy flowed into him. What happened next made everyone's jaws drop. Having missed, Brandon stumbled forward and fell, landing directly on top of the wailing Jenna Yin. Then, as if possessed, he dropped the cone and wrapped his arms tightly around her. His expression became hazy and feverish, and he began to laugh lewdly, his body starting to move in a shockingly obscene manner. The crowd erupted. Young women blushed and peeked through their fingers. Older men roared with laughter, some even pulling out their phones to film the bizarre spectacle. Brandon, what are you doing? Kevin, having just recovered from the stench of the trash, was now confronted with this traumatizing scene. Jenna shrieked in despair, trying to push him off, but to no avail. Only after a final, full-body shudder did Brandon stand up, his eyes still glazed over. Ian, what did you do to them? Kevin demanded, his voice a mixture of shock and rage. I'm just a loser. What could I do? Ian shrugged innocently. But it looks like your future brother-in-law's character is a bit questionable. You should probably keep a close eye on your wife in the future. With that, he turned his back on the chaotic scene and left with Stella, Matthew, and Zheng Li, leaving Kevin to fume amidst his mortified, dazed mother and future brother-in-law. In the car, a shaken Stella couldn't help but ask, What happened to Brandon back there? Was that really you? If I told you I knew magic, would you believe me? Ian said, half joking. Of course, Stella didn't believe him, chalking it up to a bizarre coincidence. When they brought Matthew home, his mother, Evelyn, was heartbroken to see the handprint on his face. When she learned from Stella that it was Ian who had once again saved the day, she looked at him with immense gratitude. Ian, thank you. You've been such a huge help to our family. Mom, it's what I should do, Ian replied earnestly, stirring a strange feeling in Stella's heart. For a moment, she wished he wasn't just acting, that he truly meant it. During their conversation, Ian astutely observed that Matthew's condition wasn't just simple brain damage. Mom, he asked thoughtfully, Have you had Matthew treated for this? Evelyn sighed, recounting years of fruitless searches for a cure. Specialists at home and abroad were helpless. Their only hope lay with the mythical, almost non-existent celestial healers sect. I could give it a try, Ian said, stunning everyone. His illness is caused by trauma to the cranial nerves. If we can clear the blockages, he can recover. But for a complete cure, we'll need a rare herb called Netherworld Clarity Grass. You can treat him? Stella was skeptical. So many experts couldn't help him, and you think you can with a few needles? Ian just smiled. Under Evelyn's hopeful gaze, he took out his needle pouch. Using a special technique to lull Matthew into a calm state, he produced 5 golden needles and inserted them with precision into several major acupoints on his head. With a sweep of his hand over the ends of the needles, a stream of imperceptible energy flowed into Matthew's brain. A few moments later, Ian removed the needles. Matthew slowly woke up, his once dull and vacant eyes now miraculously clearer. He looked at his mother and said simply, "Mom, I'm hungry." Then he turned to Ian, stood up, and bowed deeply. "Thank you for helping me with the bad man." That simple sentence, that simple gesture, made Evelyn and Stella burst into tears. They could see that Matthew's logic and memory had noticeably improved. "Ian, my brother. He's really getting better." Stella grabbed his arm, her eyes shining with a light he had never seen before. Just then, Ian's phone rang. It was Jade Cheen, calling to berate him. He just said coldly, "You know what they did, don't you?" and hung up. Watching his decisive action, Stella's heart skipped a beat. Meanwhile, in the Yi family mansion, the mood was grim. Victor Yi was furious over his grandson's latest disaster, strictly forbidding any action against Ian until his connection to Titus Lay was clarified. He even mentioned a heaven-defying figure that even the most powerful family in the southern provinces wouldn't dare to provoke, a figure who seemed to be linked to Titus Lay. But Felix, blinded by hatred and humiliation, ignored his grandfather's warnings. His eyes were bloodshot as he swore to himself, "Ian Pai, one day, I will kill you. And that little reporter, Audrey Ouyang. If I can't get to you, I'll get to her." A sinister plot against an innocent person was quietly set in motion. After a surprisingly warm lunch at the Su family home, Ian made an excuse and drove alone back to Rohan Mountain. However, when he saw the familiar black Mercedes at the foot of the mountain, he frowned. It was Titus Lay. He was still here. The spiritual energy here seemed particularly rich, greatly benefiting his cultivation. An idea sparked in Ian's mind. He had a mountain of questions that needed answers. He parked the car, grabbed his needle pouch, and strode up the mountain. Sure enough, halfway up, Titus Lay and his grandchildren were waiting, as if specifically for him. The moment Titus saw him, he bowed deeply from a distance, an act of deference that made his granddaughter, Ruby, watch with deep suspicion. "Mr. Pai, perfect timing. There is something I wish to discuss with you," Titus said, his posture incredibly humble. "Good. I have some questions for you as well," Ian replied calmly. After sending his grandchildren away, Titus led Ian into the quiet bamboo grove. Once they were inside, Titus's entire demeanor changed. He stepped in front of Ian, clasped his fists, and bowed deeply. Subordinate Titus Lay, Master of the Wind and Thunder Hall, pays his respects to the Ninth Master. The title Ninth Master was like a bolt of lightning, illuminating the many mysteries in Ian's mind. He finally understood why Titus had so staunchly supported him at the engagement party. He had known his identity all along. At ease, Ian accepted the title without betraying any surprise. He then began to ask about the Nine Mysteries sect and the Wind and Thunder Hall. From Titus, he learned that the Wind and Thunder Hall was the sect's martial branch in the southern region, and Mr. Kai, who had helped him before, was the head of the Xinjiang chapter. However, when he pressed for more details about the sect's overall structure, Titus was bound by a strict code of silence. The code again. Ian cursed internally. He felt like a pathetic sect master, not only broke, but also completely ignorant of his own organization. "Right." Ian suppressed his frustration and opened his needle pouch. "Since we're here, I might as well treat that old injury of yours." When Titus saw the 18 needles, 9 gold, 9 silver, his eyes lit up with disbelief. The celestial 18 needles. The Ninth Master has truly inherited the Grand Master's legacy. Ian said no more. He took a golden needle and, with lightning-fast movements, inserted 5 of them, sending a powerful stream of energy into Titus's body. Ian removed the needles and pointed out a flaw in his cultivation technique. As the final needle entered a core acupoint, the 5 streams of energy converged, causing a violent surge within Titus's core. He gritted his teeth through the excruciating pain and finally let out a long, powerful roar that shook the entire mountain. Titus felt the chronic ailment that had plagued him for years vanish, his energy channels clear and open. Overcome with gratitude, he was about to kneel again in thanks. "Thank you, Ninth Master, for giving me a new life." Ian thought to himself, gratitude? How about something a little more practical? But as the esteemed master of the Nine Mysteries sect, he couldn't bring himself to ask a subordinate for baby formula money. After sending Titus on his way, Ian meditated on the mountaintop until dusk. The next 2 days were unexpectedly peaceful. Stella's attitude toward him grew gentler. Her brother's miraculous recovery had fostered in her a genuine sense of gratitude and reliance on her husband and name. But that peace was shattered by a frantic phone call. It was Crystal Gu, her voice choked with sobs and panic. As Ian answered, Stella teased from the side. "Is that your Miss Gu again? Are you going to the movies or playing cards?" But her teasing died on her lips as she saw Ian's face turn to stone. A chilling aura radiated from him, so intense it seemed to drop the temperature in the entire room. "Okay, I understand. I'm on my way," was all Ian said before hanging up, grabbing his car keys, and bolting for the door. "What happened?" Stella asked, alarmed. "Audrey Ouyang has been kidnapped." Rage surged through Ian. Audrey had gotten dragged into this mess because of him, and he would not let her get hurt. As he sped toward the college, he dialed Mr. Kai's number, his voice as cold as ice. "This is Ian Pai. I need you to find someone for me. A reporter from Xinjiang TV, Audrey Ouyang. Turn this city upside down if you have to, but find her." At his command, the city's entire underworld roared to life. Countless black cars flooded the streets, and men in black suits stormed into every entertainment venue. A photo of a reporter passing from hand to hand in every corner of the city. After picking up a distraught Crystal Gu, Ian quickly received a location from Mr. Kai, the abandoned chemical plant on the west side of the city. At that moment, in the dark and dilapidated factory, Audrey was tied up, her hair disheveled, her clothes torn. Mr. Zhao stood over her, a cigar in his mouth and a lecherous grin on his face, surrounded by dozens of his thugs. "Miss Ouyang, you stuck your nose where it didn't belong. Now you have to pay the price," Mr. Zhao said, grabbing her chest. "You bastard." Audrey spat, overcome with shame and rage. "That's right, I am a bastard." Mr. Zhao laughed maniacally, tearing open her outer shirt. "And tonight, you're going to find out just what kind of bastard I can be." As Audrey let out a desperate scream, the roar of a car engine grew deafeningly loud. A beam of brilliant light pierced the darkness like a sword, stabbing into the heart of the factory. With several sickening thuds, a few thugs were sent flying as the car plowed through them. The door opened, and Ian stepped out. Silhouetted against the blinding headlights, he looked like a demon emerging from hell. He ignored the dozens of gleaming machetes and walked step by step toward Mr. Zhao, his voice a chilling whisper that cut through the silence. "Zhao, you are looking for death." Inside the abandoned chemical plant, the air was thick with the smell of rust, dust, and the sweat of dozens of menacing thugs. Mr. Zhao felt a chill creep up his spine from the sheer killing intent radiating from Ian, but he quickly suppressed his fear. "Ian Pai, you're nothing but a worthless freeloader," he sneered, his voice echoing in the vast space. "You think you can fight, so you can do whatever you want? Let me tell you, there are people in this world you can never afford to provoke, like the Yi family. Whether I can handle the Yi family is not your concern." Ian's tone was colder than ice, his right hand slowly clenching into a fist. "Right now, you should be concerned about what's going to happen to you." Realizing the imminent danger, Mr. Zhao moved instantly, his fingers clamping around Audrey Ouyang's throat like a vice. "Don't come any closer, or I'll snap this little bitch's neck." Audrey let out a choked gasp, her face turning red. Ian froze, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. He was consumed with rage, but helpless. Inside the car, Crystal was in tears, trapped by the locked doors. "Ha ha ha, Ian Pai. Tonight, this place will be your grave." Seeing Ian hesitate, Mr. Zhao laughed triumphantly. "Get him. Whoever kills this kid gets $1,000,000. Tempted by the reward, the thugs transformed into a pack of wolves, howling as they charged at Ian with their gleaming machetes. At that critical moment, the deafening roar of car engines thundered from the distance, growing louder with each passing second. An endless convoy of black cars, a river of steel and darkness, stormed down the abandoned road. Their interwoven headlights cast a brilliant net of light, instantly illuminating the entire factory grounds as if it were day. With a symphony of screeching tires, hundreds of car doors opened simultaneously. An army of men in black suits poured out like a tidal wave, their murderous aura palpable as they surrounded the entire area. The door of a black Mercedes opened, and an old man in a white traditional suit, leaning on a walking stick, stepped out. His gaze was as sharp as a blade as it swept across the scene. "I'd like to see who dares to make a move," he boomed. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried an undeniable authority and killing intent. Mr. Zhao and his motley crew were stunned into silence, frozen like statues. The old man was the legend of Xinjiang's underworld, Mr. Kai. He strode over to Ian and bowed slightly. "Mr. Hi, I'm late. My apologies." "Just in time," Ian replied calmly. "Mr. Kai." Mr. Zhao's voice trembled. But Mr. Kai didn't even look at him. He stood tall and barked, "Drop your weapons. Anyone who doesn't will lose a hand." Hundreds of men roared in unison, the sound shaking the very ground. Mr. Zhao's men were terrified, their machetes clattering to the floor. One man who was too slow was dragged out, and with a swift chop, his hand was severed at the wrist. His agonized scream tore through the night. Hands on your head. Get down. In an instant, the situation was completely reversed. Only then did Mr. Kai turn his icy gaze to Mr. Zhao. Zhao, you've really outdone yourself. You dared to offend Mr. Pai. It seems you've grown tired of living. Now kneel. Mr. Zhao's face was ashen, but he tried to play his final card. Mr. Kai, Ian Pai is just a freeloader. Why are you helping him? The Yi family is backing me. The Yi family? Mr. Kai sneered. Is that what you're relying on? Do you think the Yi family can protect you from me? Dragon. Tiger. Teach him how to kneel. Two of his top men stepped forward. With two sickening cracks, both of Mr. Zhao's shins were shattered. Bone protruded from his pants as he collapsed to his knees, letting out an inhuman scream. Ian finally relaxed, remotely unlocking the car. After ensuring they were safe, Ian walked slowly to Mr. Zhao, his eyes cold. Don't kill him, he said slowly. Crystal rushed out and ran to the trembling Audrey. Then, he lifted his foot and delivered a vicious kick directly to Mr. Zhao's groin. The sound was enough to make every man present instinctively cross their legs. Now tell me, who's the worthless one? Ian asked with contempt. Mr. Zhao curled up on the ground, shaking violently. The physical pain was nothing compared to the soul-crushing despair. He, a notorious womanizer, was now less than a man. Ian turned and patted Mr. Kai on the shoulder. You did well. He then walked back to his car, leaving a final, chilling order. Remember, let him live. Like a dog. Mr. Kai understood instantly. It was a punishment far crueler than death. Yes, I understand, he replied respectfully. The next few days, a storm swept through Xinjiang. The infamous Mr. Zhao vanished, his businesses changing hands overnight. Ian, however, returned to a quiet life, as if the blood and violence had never happened. Stella was still struggling with the $500 million investment, pushed to the brink by the Yi family's blockade. Finally, the day of the Soaring Dragon Commerce Guild's investment conference arrived. It was Stella's last chance, and the deadline her grandfather had set. Ian drove the car, carrying a formally dressed and anxious Stella and Zhongli, to the venue, the Splendor Resort. The entrance was a sea of luxury cars and powerful figures. As the three of them got out, an angry voice called out from behind them. Ian Pai. At the entrance of the Splendor Resort, the morning sun cast a golden sheen on the lavish grounds, the very air seeming to shimmer with wealth and power. However, the tranquility was shattered by a furious shout. Ian Pai. All three turned to see Jade Qin, Kevin Qin, and Brandon Hua striding toward them. Jade's face was an icy mask. She stopped in front of Ian and demanded, Ian, don't you think you owe me an explanation? An explanation? Ian feigned surprise. For what? You hit my brother and humiliated my mother. Are we just supposed to forget about it? Jade's voice was sharp with anger. I hit him, yes? Ian said, glancing coolly at Kevin. But I didn't touch your mother. As for what really happened that day, are you sure you know? Or are you just being your usual self-righteous and unreasonable self? You. Jade's face flushed. Of course I know. You were upset about being kicked out of the family, so you deliberately took revenge on them. I never knew you were so dark-hearted. Just then, a gentle hand linked with Ian's arm. Stella had moved to his side, her posture intimate, but her eyes held a cool edge. She looked at Jade and said calmly, Ex-wife, you've got it all wrong. Seeing their closeness, a strange sourness churned in Jade's stomach. Stella continued, I was there that day. It was your brother who hit my brother first and tried to throw him in a trash can. My husband was simply teaching his former brother-in-law a lesson on behalf of his current one. I don't see anything wrong with that. Exactly, Kevin interjected with a sneer. He was like a dog at our house, trying to please everyone. The moment he's divorced, he turns around and bites. That's nonsense. Zhongli snapped. You have some nerve, bullying someone with a mental disability. As the argument was about to escalate, Brandon Hua stepped forward, standing proprietorially beside Jade. He looked at Ian with arrogance. Well, the Su family is about to go up in flames, and you still have time for an investment conference? I'd save your energy. Who in Xinjiang would dare to invest in you now? To be honest, the investment spot for this conference has already been decided. Oh, Ian looked at him with amusement. So, the Qin family was chosen? Of course, Kevin blurted out. With Brandon here, it was a piece of cake. Brandon puffed out his chest. It was nothing. President Meng and my father are old friends. He had to do me this small favor. Hearing this, Stella and Zheng Li's hearts sank. But Ian's eyes glinted. Since you're so confident, how about a bet? A bet on what? Brandon's interest was piqued. On this investment. If the Qin family gets it, I lose. If the Su family gets it, you lose. The Su family? Are you kidding me? Brandon laughed as if it were the funniest thing he'd ever heard. Are you brave enough to take the bet or not? The stakes, $5 million. Ian said, holding up 5 fingers. $5 million. Kevin scoffed. Can you even afford that? Ian glanced at Stella and smiled. I can't, but my wife can. Stella was stunned. Looking into Ian's confident eyes, she made a snap decision, gritting her teeth and lifting her chin. That's right. If we lose, I'll pay. If necessary, this car is the collateral. Deal. Brandon was ecstatic, already picturing the $5 million in his hands. Their group swaggered into the resort. Are you crazy? $5 million, Stella muttered under her breath. Relax, Ian winked at her. I read my own fortune this morning. A windfall is coming my way. He then pulled out his phone and made a call. Hello, I'm at the entrance. A surprised and respectful voice answered. Dr. Hi, you've arrived. I'll be right out to greet you. As he hung up, Ian recalled a scene from months ago. The president of the Soaring Dragon Commerce Guild, Mason Meng, had been distraught over being childless in his 50s. He had found Ian's stall under a bridge, initially skeptical. But when Ian accurately revealed his long-buried secrets, how he had gotten a girl pregnant who then took her own life, and a later accident that had left him sterile, Meng was completely convinced. After a few sessions of acupuncture and some herbal medicine from Ian, Meng's wife, barren for years, had miraculously become pregnant. Since then, Meng had revered Ian as a living deity. Now, in a lavish private lounge, Mason Meng was bowing to Ian. Dr. Hi, thank you. My wife is pregnant. You are the greatest benefactor of the Meng family. The Su family needs $500 million in capital, Ian said calmly. No problem. Meng slapped his chest. The original investment was $300 million, but since you've asked, I'll raise it to $500. All of it for the Su family. Ian nodded, satisfied. Before leaving, he added, when we're outside, pretend you don't know me for a while. I want to watch a little show. Understood, understood. Don't you worry, Dr. Hot. When Stella and Zheng Li entered the grand, glittering hall, the bustling room fell into an eerie silence. All eyes turned to them, filled with scorn, pity, and schadenfreude. People moved away as if they were contagious, creating an empty space around them. Why is Stella Su here? After offending the Yi family, she still has the nerve to show her face? I know, so shameless. Running off with a loser during her own wedding. The cutting whispers were everywhere. Stella felt as if needles were pricking her heart, but she forced herself to hold her head high. She saw a former best friend, Lindley, and was about to greet her, but the woman recoiled as if she'd seen a ghost, and said coldly, I don't know you. In that moment, Stella felt a bone-deep sorrow. Across the room, Kevin and his group were laughing openly. Suddenly, a commotion at the entrance. Someone announced, Miss Ava Yi has arrived. The crowd buzzed with excitement, swarming toward the door. Ava Yi, Felix's sister, a woman draped in countless accolades, had arrived like a queen. She basked in the attention, her eyes quickly finding the isolated Stella in the corner. A haughty smirk played on her lips as she made her way through the fawning crowd, heading straight for her. Stella Su, you certainly have high standards. Even my brother wasn't good enough for you. Ava's voice dripped with condescension. I heard you fell for a pretty boy, a freeloader. The moment his ex-wife kicked him out, you couldn't wait to marry him. Is that true? Faced with the blatant humiliation, Stella trembled with rage, but was at a loss for words. Just as she was cornered and overwhelmed, a solemn voice cut through the crowd from behind. Who was being so domineering as to deny someone the right to speak? When Ian's figure came into view, the tense atmosphere immediately became more complex. Ava Yi looked at the calmly approaching man, a predatory glint in her eyes, like a hunter sizing up its prey. And who are you? Ava's tone softened slightly, despite herself. Ian Pai. He replied simply, as if he were addressing a random stranger and not the most powerful heiress in Xinjiang. Miss Yi, he's the pretty boy, the freeloader you were talking about. Kevin Chin yapped, eager to curry favor. And I'll add one more thing. He's a cheap fortune teller who scams old people. Ava's expression turned cold. So you're the one who stole my brother's fiancée at their engagement party? Ian smiled faintly and corrected her. Stella Su was already my legal wife before that party. So it wasn't stealing. It was bringing my wife home. A strange warmth spread through Stella's heart. She calmly stepped forward, linked her arm with Ian's again, and said, I never agreed to the marriage alliance between the Yi and Su families. I will not be a sacrifice for my family. I have the right to choose my own future. Anyone else, perhaps. Ava's eyes were like shards of ice. But this is the Yi family. And what about the Yi family? Ian retorted with a cold smile. Does that give you the right to be bullies? Humph, you should know that offending the Yi family has consequences, Ava said, shifting her attack to Stella's weakest point. I imagine the trouble your family is in right now is significant, isn't it? Stella's face paled slightly. Brandon Hua and Kevin Chin seized the opportunity to mock them for even dreaming of getting the Soaring Dragon investment. You want to win the Soaring Dragon investment? Ava looked at Stella with amusement, as if watching a clown in its death throes. Stella's heart sank. With Ava Yi here, it was impossible. Mason Meng and the Yi family were close. He would never offend them for the sake of the Su family. That's because they lack vision. Just as Stella was about to give up, Ian spoke, his voice ringing with astounding confidence. I bet you, in less than 3 years, the Su family will be at the pinnacle of Xinjiang. The entire hall erupted in derisive laughter. Everyone looked at Ian as if he were a madman. Ava laughed so hard that her initial flicker of interest turned into deep disdain. Ian, instead of worrying about the Su family's future, maybe you should worry about how you're going to pay me the 5 million you're about to lose. Brandon cackled. 5 million? Ava asked curiously. He bet me 5 million that the Su family would get the investment today. Brandon explained excitedly. Ian just looked at him with a playful glint in his eye. Well, in that case, do you dare to raise the stakes? Stella's heart nearly leaped out of her chest. Was he insane? He was going to bankrupt her. Fine. How much? Brandon's pride was stoked. He wouldn't be intimidated by a loser. 10 million, Ian said without hesitation. I'll take that bet. Brandon agreed instantly, already imagining what he could do with Stella once she couldn't pay. I'll also bet 10 million, Ava said coldly. She wanted to be the one to personally grind Stella into the dirt. I'll take it. Ian's eyes lit up, as excited as a gambler who had just walked into a casino. Like sharks smelling blood, Kevin Sheen, Lin Li, and many other guests rushed to place their own bets against the Su family, eager to profit from their inevitable downfall. Ian accepted every single bet, even grinning at Zheng Li. Granny Zheng, keep a good record. My baby's formula money depends on them. Zheng Li trembled with anger, but could only grimly record the names and numbers. The total wagers against them had reached nearly 50 million. Cold sweat soaked Stella's back. Ian had put her in an impossible position, and all she could do was bluff. She had already lost 5 million in her mind, so what was 50? A strange sense of calm washed over her, the peace of someone who had nothing left to lose. The conference officially began. And Wei from a pharmaceutical company and Jade Sheen from the Qin Group gave their presentations, both brimming with confidence. When it was her turn, Jade even shot a provocative glance at Ian and Stella. Mason Meng praised both presentations highly, and with each word, Stella's heart grew colder. Finally, it was her turn. She took a deep breath, but before she could stand, a cool, arrogant voice cut in. President Meng, I am Ava Yi. I would like to present. Mason Meng's eyebrow twitched almost imperceptibly, but Stella felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Her face went deathly pale, a cold sweat breaking out on her back. Ava Yi entering the competition was a fatal blow, extinguishing her very last glimmer of hope. In that moment, Stella's heart plunged into an abyss. Ava Yi's personal entry into the competition was an insurmountable mountain, crushing her last shred of hope. Beside her, Zheng Li let out a despairing sigh. It's over. She's definitely doing this to crush us. Yet Ian seemed completely unfazed, his fingers still swiping at a game on his phone. As a CEO, you need to be steady, he said dismissively. It's not over until the final second. You have a lot of nerve. Stella's voice trembled with a mix of anger and defeat. That's the heiress of the Yi family. President Meng is a close friend of her father's. Do you really think he'd offend the Yi family for us? Her eyes reddened, and she started to get up. She couldn't bear to stay and be the laughingstock in someone else's victory celebration. But as she moved, a warm hand closed firmly around her wrist. Trying to leave? Ian asked without looking up. Don't forget the nearly $50 million bet. You're the guarantor. If you walk out now, do you think they'll let you leave this resort? Stella froze and sank back into her chair, defeated. He was right. Several wary eyes were already watching her. She was trapped, forced to await her own public execution. On stage, Ava Yi confidently laid out her grand vision to build a new cosmetics empire in Xinjiang, requesting a $100 million investment from the guild. Just as Mason Meng was showing a troubled expression, a lazy voice cut through the room. Miss Yi, what's the name of your company? Everyone stared in disbelief at the man who was still looking down at his phone. Ian finally put his phone away, stood up, and stretched. Oh, so in other words, Miss Yi is planning to get something for nothing? Is this advanced business model something you learned overseas? His words were casual, but they were a sharp barb that struck deep. Ava's face clouded over. What do you know about business operations? I don't know anything, Ian said unapologetically. But I do know that the Soaring Dragon Commerce Guild invests in tangible assets. Your company doesn't even exist yet. What if you're a fraud? The investment would be a total loss. The hall erupted in gasps. Calling the heiress of the Yi family a fraud? This guy was insane. Brandon Hua leaped at the chance to defend her. Kid, I think you've lost your mind. How dare you call Miss Yi a fraud? Ian shot him a sidelong glance, a deeply contemptuous smirk on his lips. What's the matter? Did the bones my ex-wife threw you not last very long? Already found a new master to serve. The insult was devastating. Brandon's face turned a furious shade of purple, and he trembled with rage. Silence. Mason Meng's voice cut through the chaos. He looked at Stella, indicating it was her turn. But by now, Stella was completely demoralized and lacked the courage to stand. Giving up, Ian muttered, his tone dripping with scorn. Mason Meng was also getting anxious. He couldn't just hand Stella 500 million if she didn't even say a word. Just as he was about to force the issue, Stella gritted her teeth and shot to her feet. Her defiant pride had finally been reignited. I am here too. I, Stella Sue, will present on behalf of the Sue Group. However, the moment she began to speak, Brandon, Kevin, and others attacked, demanding that Meng disqualify her on the grounds that her family's reputation was ruined and they were on the verge of bankruptcy. The room descended into chaos, with nearly everyone turning against her. This only fueled her determination. President Meng, if Miss Yi can present for a company that doesn't even exist, surely the Sue Group, which has been a pillar of this city for decades, has the right to present. Her voice was quiet but powerful, and her question made Ava Ye's face turn pale with anger. With Meng's insistence, Stella finally got her chance. She suppressed the despair in her heart and spoke with calm strength. The pharmaceutical division of the Sue Group is willing to offer 20% of its shares in exchange for a $500 million investment. I firmly believe we can overcome this crisis and achieve greatness. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment, then exploded with laughter. Is she crazy? The entire investment pool is only $300 million, and she's asking for $500. Ian Pye, get your money ready. I want every penny of my $500,000. Waves of mockery and derision washed over them. Kevin even lamented to Jade. Sis, I should have borrowed more money to bet. Quiet. Mason Meng slammed his hand on the table, announcing a 30-minute recess for a conference call with his shareholders. The moment he left, Brandon sauntered over to Ian. Kid, still hoping for a miracle? In half an hour, we'll see who's crying. Ian replied with a serene smile. The conference call was just an excuse. In a back garden, Mason Meng was happily listening to his wife Hannah's slightly rounded belly. Mason, she reminded him, Dr. Pye is our family's greatest benefactor. You have to keep your promise to him. Don't worry, Meng smiled. My next two sons depend on him. That Jade Qin girl, she really threw away a heavenly fortune with her own hands. What a pity. Half an hour later, a cheerful Mason Meng returned to the hall. The room fell silent. Ava Yi urged him impatiently. President Meng, make the announcement. He cleared his throat. After consulting with all our shareholders, we've concluded that the potential of the Qin Group, Miss Ye's proposal, and the pharmaceutical company are all quite promising. Before he could finish, Jade had already stood up excitedly, and Brandon was moving to take credit. Stella and Zheng Li felt a cold dread wash over them. It was over. A debt of nearly $50 million. They would never be able to pay it back. Everyone, please be patient, Meng said, a playful smile on his face. I haven't finished speaking. The room fell silent again. Brandon said impatiently, we already know the result. $300 million, split 3 ways. Mason Meng slowly shook his head. Everyone was confused. What did that mean? First, let me make a correction. Meng's voice was crystal clear in the quiet hall. After our meeting, we have decided to increase this investment to $500 million. $500 million, the crowd gasped. Brandon blurted out. Then, who gets the other $200 million? Meng shook his head again, dropping a second bombshell. Wrong. We intend to invest this $500 million in a single company. One company? Jade and Ava's hearts leaped into their throats. A terrible premonition began to dawn. The only person who had requested $500 million was Stella Sue. After careful deliberation, Meng paused, his gaze sweeping across the room before finally landing on Stella's shocked and bewildered face. He announced loudly, the company we have chosen to invest in is the Sue Group's pharmaceutical division. Boom. The world seemed to go silent. The hall was utterly still, so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Everyone stared, their expressions frozen, like a collection of statues. After a full 30 seconds, someone finally stammered, Did I just mishear that? Ava Yi, Jade Qin, Brandon Hua. The faces that had been so smug and mocking just moments before were now dark, twisted, and utterly horrified. The world seemed to go silent. Time stretched infinitely, the air turned solid, and everyone held their breath. Stella and Zheng Li stood frozen, their minds completely blank. Mason Meng's resounding declaration, the Sue Group's pharmaceutical division, echoed in their souls like a thunderclap, leaving them dizzy and disoriented. Happiness had struck so suddenly, so unbelievably, that Stella wondered if she was hallucinating from sheer despair. It was only when a warm hand took hers and Ian's cheeky voice whispered in her ear, Honey, time for your acceptance speech, that she snapped back to reality. A spotlight seemed to fall on them, separating them from the shocked, envious, and venomous stares around them. Stella stood up numbly, her face flushed with a beautiful shade of pink from the overwhelming excitement. She bowed deeply to Mason Meng on the stage, her voice trembling. Thank you, President Meng. Thank you to the Soaring Dragon Commerce Guild for your faith in the Sue Group. I will make the best use of this capital to lead our company out of this crisis. Mason Meng nodded in satisfaction. Miss Sue, I will personally bring the contract to your residence tomorrow. Please be prepared. This exchange was like a series of hammer blows, shattering the last vestiges of hope in the hearts of Ava Yi and Jade Qin. Their faces turned from ashen to a deep purple, as if they had swallowed 1,000 flies. What was supposed to be a triumphant humiliation of Stella had turned into their own public circus. Brandon. Jade's voice was as cold as ice. Didn't you say your father had already made a deal with President Meng? What is the meaning of this? Brandon was livid. He refused to accept defeat and shouted at the departing Mason Meng. President Meng, this isn't right. You promised my father you would invest in the Qin family. His accusation made the atmosphere in the room even more bizarre. Meng spun around, his face dark. Young mister. Hua, you can eat what you want, but you can't say what you want. The investments of the Soaring Dragon Commerce Guild are decided by our shareholders. When have I ever made a private promise to anyone? You are slandering the reputation of our guild. His words left Brandon speechless, breaking out in a cold sweat. Ava Yi was also unwilling to let it go. President Meng, given the Su family's current difficulties, your 500 million is just throwing good money after bad. Are you trying to teach me how to do business, Miss Yi? Meng cut her off sharply. I am confident in the Su family's potential. This decision is final. He then turned and left, leaving a single cold instruction. Show our guests out. The hall erupted into chaos as people scrambled to leave, but everyone lingered outside the resort, waiting for the final act of the drama. Granny Zheng, get the ledger out. It's time to collect. Ian's eyes were practically sparkling with visions of cash. He led Stella and Zheng Li straight to the grim-faced Brandon and Ava. Mr. Hua, Miss Yi, thank you for your generous contributions. If you would please transfer the funds. Ian's expression was infuriatingly smug. Ava was trembling, her chest feeling tight enough to explode. She glared at Stella, her words dripping with venom. Stella Su, I never knew you had such tricks up your sleeve. I wonder what you had to do to convince President Meng to give you that investment. Her insinuation, that Stella had used her body to secure the deal, was clear. The gazes of the onlookers turned sly and speculative. Miss Yi, before you worry about what my wife did. Ian's smile vanished, his eyes turning sharp. Why don't you pay what you owe? The great heiress of the Yi family wouldn't try to welch on a bet, would she? Humph, your wife has made you the biggest fool in the city, and you're still thinking about money? Ava sneered. Stella's face turned pale with anger. Ava Yi, how dare you? But Ian suddenly laughed, looking Ava up and down as if she were an amusing museum piece. I hear you did very well for yourself in Europe. Made 10 million euros in a single year. That was just something I did for fun, Ava said, lifting her chin proudly. Tisk, tisk. Ian shook his head, then waved a hand in front of his nose in disgust, and took 2 steps back. No matter how much perfume you wear, it can't cover up that fishy smell. I suggest you go see a doctor. Otherwise, that grand ambition of yours might lose its most important asset. A few stifled chuckles came from the crowd. Ava's face instantly went white, a flicker of panic in her eyes. She did have a personal hygiene issue and had overcompensated with perfume, but she never imagined this man would call her out on it in public. She felt a sudden itch and instinctively squeezed her legs together. You're lying. You're insane, she shrieked. Unable to bear it a moment longer, she frantically pulled out her phone, transferred the 10 million, and fled to her Porsche without a backward glance. Granny Zheng, collect the money. Ian's brilliant smile returned. One by one, Brandon Hua and Wei and the others lined up like condemned prisoners to transfer their lost bets. The constant chime of incoming transfers was the most beautiful symphony Ian had ever heard. When it was Kevin Sheen's turn to pay, Stella herself stepped forward and said to Jade, Hey, ex-wife, this isn't right. Can't you see my Ian is trying to earn some money for our baby's formula? You're going to deny a child his milk. Finally, after Brandon paid Kevin's $100,000 debt, the nearly $50 million betting pool concluded with Ian as the undisputed winner. In the car on the way back, the atmosphere was a bit strange. Stella's eyes glinted, and she asked in an unusually gentle voice, Ian, now that you have so much money, what are you going to do with it? Save it. It's milk money. I have to be careful with it. He replied without thinking. Oh, you have your bank card with you, right? Let me see it, just to make sure you didn't lose it in the crowd. Ian unsuspectingly pulled out his card. How could I lose it, see? Before he could finish, a slender hand snatched the card from his fingers. Honey, did you say? This is for milk money, Stella asked, tapping the card against her palm with a sweet smile. Yeah. Ian suddenly felt a sense of dread. Why was she suddenly calling him honey? Then that settles it, Stella said, tucking the card firmly into her purse. Since it's milk money, I, as the mother, should be the one to keep it safe. Can't have you losing it. Ian was completely dumbfounded. He stared at Stella, then at Zheng Li, who was trying to stifle her laughter, and finally sighed in defeat. He had won nearly 50 million, and before the card had even warmed up in his pocket, it had been swallowed by a tiger. He leaned back in his seat, thinking to himself, this woman is too controlling. As soon as this contract is up, I'm gone. This woman is trouble. On the way back to the villa, the mood in the car was strange. Zhang Li was still giddy from the $48 million windfall, a smile plastered on her face. Stella clutched her handbag tightly, as if it contained not a bank card, but her newfound peace of mind. Only Ian drove in sullen silence. occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror at the bag containing his milk money, sighing to himself. This woman is definitely trouble. The euphoria of their victory began to fade as they walked through the villa's front door, replaced by the cold light of reality. Zheng Li was still excitedly planning the future. Ms. Su, tomorrow you'll return to the company in triumph. With this 500 million, the pharmaceutical division will surely survive. But Stella slowly shook her head, the tough exterior she'd worn all day finally cracking to reveal her exhaustion. She sank into the soft sofa. It's not that simple, she said quietly. Right now, the entire business community in Xinjiang is avoiding us like the plague. Even with this money, it's just a temporary fix. As long as the Yi family's blockade is in place, we have no stable partners, no sales channels. This money will eventually run out. Zheng Li's excitement was doused with cold water as the gravity of the situation hit her. Then, what do we do? Unless we can develop a groundbreaking product that can carve out its own market. But where would we find a product like that? Stella sighed. That was the real problem. As the two of them sat in despair, Ian, who had been silent until now, spoke up, his tone so casual it was almost jarring. Is it just a drug formula? You two are worrying too much. Meanwhile, in a private room at a high-end restaurant, Simon Su and his son Stan were celebrating with their cousins, Peter and Scott. All of them were flushed with victory. Simon swirled the wine in his glass. Brothers, as you know, Stan is only the interim CEO. Today is the last day. Tomorrow, Stella Su is supposed to return. We can't let that happen. Scott, whom Stan had promoted from warehouse manager to head of security, was the first to object. I'm not going back to the warehouse. Stella didn't get the 500 million. What right does she have to come back? Stan sneered, confident in his analysis. Don't worry, Uncle Scott. It's impossible for her to get the investment. First, the total investment from the Soaring Dragon Commerce Guild this year is only 300 million. Second, and most importantly, the heiress of the Yi family, Ava Yi, was also at the conference. With her there, Stella was just making a fool of herself. Besides, President Meng and Julian Yi are close friends. Stella couldn't get a penny of that investment. His words completely reassured the group. Peter raised his glass. To Stan, who tomorrow will officially become the CEO of the Su Group. The room filled with fawning congratulations, as they all envisioned Stella's pathetic departure from the next day's board meeting. Back at the villa, Stella and Zheng Li were still staring at Ian, speechless after his casual dismissal of their problem. Can you please stop boasting? Stella frowned. You know a little bit about medicine, but that's completely different from pharmaceutical research and development. To me, it's the same thing, Ian said proudly. I have plenty of formulas. Any one of them could shake the market. You believe me, right? No, they said in unison. Ian seemed annoyed. He leaned in conspiratorially toward Stella and whispered, I have an amazing formula. If we produce it, it will be a global sensation. I've even thought of a name for it. Let's call it the Dragon's Vigor Pill. Dragon's Vigor Pill? Stella was taken aback. What kind of medicine is that? It sounds like something a street peddler would sell. Ian winked mysteriously. Have you ever heard the saying, 9 out of 10 men have issues? Both women stared at him for a second, then their faces turned beet red. Shameless. Stella spat. I'm just telling the truth. Ian continued earnestly. The Dragon's Vigor Pill, specifically for men's troubles. One pill, and he'll be happy, but you'll be happier. Zheng Li burst out laughing. Stella was a mixture of embarrassed and annoyed. All right, so it's that kind of medicine. The market is full of them. You think your little pill is going to take over the world. It's not the same, Ian insisted. Those are harsh drugs that damage the body. Mine is a pure herbal formula, all natural, non-toxic, and focused on healthy, long-lasting performance. He warmed to his subject, then looked at the two women and shook his head in pity. It's a shame you don't appreciate such a great formula. Well, whenever you want it, just let me know. Pervert. Stella finally understood his double entendre and threw a cushion at him. The next morning, in front of the Su Group's headquarters, Stella emerged from the car in a sharp business suit, her exhaustion from the previous day replaced by a steely determination. Today was the day of her triumphant return. However, as soon as she stepped out, another car screeched to a halt beside them. Stan leaned out, a smug grin on his face. Well, Stella. Eager, are we? Decided to give up and come early to hand things over? You're here early too, aren't you? A little impatient to take the seat for real? Stella retorted sharply. As she walked into the lobby, she noticed the security guards had been replaced. A thuggish-looking young guard blocked her way, tilting his head. CEO Su? What CEO? Since when is our CEO a woman? Only when Stan walked in did the guard's demeanor change, bowing and scraping. Good morning, CEO Su. Clearly, Stan hadn't wasted any time installing his own people. Soon, Simon, Susan, and Peter arrived together, all looking cheerful. They looked at Stella with a mixture of pity and mockery, as if she were a prisoner on her way to a public execution. Finally, a black sedan pulled up. The patriarch, Samuel Su, got out, his face grim. Behind him, Stella's father, Walter, looked pale and drained, muttering, Dad. Stella didn't know what she was doing, saying something like that. It's all that Ian Pye's fault, if he hadn't put her up to it. Samuel stopped and turned, his sharp gaze fixing on his son. You've been muttering all morning. What is it you're trying to say? The air in front of the Sioux Group headquarters grew heavy under Samuel Sue's sharp question. Sweat beaded on Walter Sue's temples. He wrung his hands, his voice tinged with pleading and anxiety. Dad, let Stella bear the consequences of her own mistakes. Losing her position as CEO is punishment enough. But my shares, please don't take them back. Matthew's medical expenses are enormous every month. If the family loses that income. Samuel's brow furrowed, his eyes as sharp as a hawk's. He cut off his son's rambling defense, his voice as hard as steel. When I say something, I mean it. I made that promise in front of everyone, and it will not be changed. Don't worry, I will pay for Matthew's treatment. Walter was left speechless, his face turning ashen. All he could do was mutter a final, useless curse. It's all that damned Ian Pye's fault. Upstairs, in the main conference room, the board of directors was already assembled. The atmosphere wasn't tense, but relaxed and expectant. In their minds, the outcome of today's meeting was a foregone conclusion. Stella would be out, and Stan would be in. Many had already gathered around Simon Sue, greeting him warmly with undisguised flattery. In the restroom, Stella splashed cold water on her face and took a deep breath, pushing all her emotions down before walking into the arena where her fate would be decided. As she entered the conference room, the chatter instantly died down. Dozens of eyes turned to her, a mixture of scrutiny, curiosity, pity, and schadenfreude. But they were disappointed. There wasn't a trace of panic or despair on Stella's face. She was as calm as a deep lake as she walked directly toward the chair to the right of the head of the table, the CEO's seat. Just as she was about to sit, a snide voice cut in. Stella, I don't think that seat is appropriate for you anymore, is it? It was Scott Sue, leaning back in his chair with a smug sneer. Why not? Stella asked calmly. Isn't it obvious? That's the CEO's seat. And what are you now? Do you really think you're worthy of that position? He humiliated her without reservation. Someone else chimed in. That's right. Even the chairman has to follow company rules. Accusatory glares shot at Stella from all directions. Rage churned within her, but she knew she couldn't lose her temper now. Swallowing her pride, she turned without a word and walked to the very end of the conference table, to a back row seat usually reserved for non-essential staff during larger meetings. Her action brought a satisfied smile to Stan's face. The chairman has arrived. Samuel and Walter walked in. When Samuel saw his granddaughter sitting in the back, his expression hardened. He strode to the head of the table, his cold gaze sweeping the room before landing on Stella. Stella, why are you sitting there? It's fine, Chairman. I'm fine here. Who said it wasn't appropriate? Samuel's voice deepened, his authority casting a palpable weight over the room. But Scott and Peter, emboldened by their numbers, pushed back, citing the rules the chairman himself had set. Just as Samuel was about to erupt, Stella spoke calmly. Chairman, don't worry about it. If I can't reclaim my position as CEO today, then it doesn't matter if I sit there now. And if I do reclaim it, then that seat will be mine anyway. Her voice was quiet, but held an unshakable resolve that made Samuel take a deep breath and sit down. The meeting began. When the topic of the company's crisis came up, Simon and the others proposed the shameless solution of having Stella apologize to the Yi family, even suggesting she serve Felix to appease their anger, which Samuel immediately shot down. Stan then revealed his own incompetence, suggesting they simply abandon the entire pharmaceutical division. Just as Samuel's disappointment reached its peak, Stella stood up. She analyzed the core of the problem with precision. Our decision to invest in the pharmaceutical sector was correct. The root of this crisis is our inability to produce a product that can shake the market. And the funding? Scott interrupted with a sneer. Didn't you say you could get a $500 million investment in 2 weeks? Today is the 16th day. Did you get it? All eyes were on Stella once again. She met their skeptical gazes, her own eyes clear and steady, and said 2 words. I did. Her words were a bombshell that exploded in the stagnant meeting room. The entire board was stunned. Even Samuel looked at her in disbelief. Stan was the first to object. You got it? Stella, this is $500 million, not just empty words. That's right. Where's the contract? Show it to us. Simon and the others demanded. The contract hasn't been signed yet, Stella explained calmly. However, the other party has agreed to come to our company this morning to sign it in person. Ha ha ha. This is getting more ridiculous by the second. Stan laughed as if he'd heard the world's greatest joke. Tell us, who is it? The Soaring Dragon Commerce Guild. President Ming. Impossible. Stan retorted immediately. You think we don't know? The guild's investment cap this year is $300 million. You're claiming you got $500 million? Your lies are getting out of hand. Stella's own father was trembling with anger. Stella, if you didn't get it, you didn't get it. Why do you have to tell such outrageous lies? You're only going to disappoint the chairman even more. Deep disappointment was now etched on Samuel's face. He shook his head slowly. Stella, I always thought you were an honest person. But today, you have greatly disappointed me. Chairman, please believe me. Stella pleaded, her voice rising. Yesterday at the Splendor Resort, I really did secure the investment. Stella, stop deceiving yourself. Stan sneered, playing what he believed was his trump card. Yesterday, a very important person was also at the Splendor Resort. Do you know who it was? Who? Samuel asked grimly. The heiress of the Yi family, Ava Yi. Stella immediately replied. That's right, she was there. Before she could say another word, Samuel's expression changed drastically. He knew with absolute certainty that with Ava Yi present, it was utterly impossible for Stella to have gotten that investment. Stan's mention of Ava Yi landed like a boulder in Samuel Sue's heart. Her presence at the conference essentially served as a death sentence for all of Stella's claims. Stan pressed his advantage, explaining how Ava was also seeking investment, and arguing that with the mighty Yi family in the running, the Sue family wouldn't get a crumb. His words extinguished the last flicker of hope in Samuel's heart. He turned to his granddaughter, his voice heavy with disappointment, and asked, Stella, what else do you have to say? Facing a room full of skeptical, mocking, and pitying stares, Stella straightened her back. She bit her lip and said with a desperate conviction, Chairman, every word I've said is the truth. If you don't believe me, we can all wait here together. President Ming personally told me he would arrive at our company at 9 o'clock sharp. 9 o'clock? Stan sneered, glancing at the wall clock. So you're saying that in less than 10 minutes, President Ming is going to walk in here with a $500 million contract? Stella's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't noticed the time. A deep unease she had been suppressing began to surface. Would Mason Ming really come? Could this all be an elaborate hoax? She shook her head. Impossible. Ava Yi had lost 10 million over this. It couldn't have been an act. Fine. We'll wait until 9. Samuel's voice was final. He decided to give his once favorite granddaughter one last chance to prove herself. Or, more likely, to accept her fate. Walter was frantic. Stella, are you crazy? Apologize to the chairman right now, he hissed. He wasn't worried about his daughter's humiliation, but about his own shares vanishing in this disastrous gamble. I'm telling the truth. Why should I apologize? Stella's reply was quiet but stubborn. In the hallway, a frantic Zheng Li was also watching the clock. Her heart sank with every tick of the second hand. There was no sign of President Ming. It seemed Miss Sue was doomed. In a daze, the image of a lazy figure flashed in her mind. Ian Pai? Clinging to this last straw, she turned and bolted for the ground floor. At the company entrance, Ian was completely absorbed in a game on his phone. Suddenly, a sharp voice interrupted him. Who are you? Stop right there. He looked up. Mason Ming, flanked by a man and a woman, was being blocked by 2 security guards. A young guard named Shan Xia was arrogantly pointing a finger at Ming. CEO Stella Su. Our group CEO is Stan Su. I think you're just a fraud trying to sneak in and sell something, aren't you? Mason Ming, the esteemed president of the Soaring Dragon Commerce Guild, had never been so insulted. His face turned crimson with anger. Just as he was about to call Ian had already closed his game and was walking over. No need to call. I'm right here. At that exact moment, Zheng Li rushed over, her face lighting up when she saw Ming. President Ming, you're here. Ms. Su is waiting for you in the conference room. Ming gestured helplessly at the guards. I'm trying to get in, but I've been stopped. Zheng Li finally understood. She turned on the older guard. Mr. Gua, President Ming is here to sign an investment contract. If you delay this, can you bear the responsibility? Before he could answer, a pot-bellied middle-aged guard swaggered over. This was Perry Pang, Stan's newly appointed security chief. His leering eyes roamed over Zheng Li's body as he smirked. Well now, who is this beautiful lady? What important company business? I think what's important is for management to communicate more. Why don't you come to my office and we can have a nice, long chat? Ian Pai, are you just going to stand there? Zheng Li cried out, turning to the only person she could rely on. Hey, Fatso, Ian said lazily. Stop drooling and let them in. Who the hell are you calling Fatso you? Shan Xie snarled, stepping forward. A crisp slap echoed through the lobby. Shan spun around 3 times, spitting out 2 bloody molars. Another slap sent him flying backward, where he collapsed in a heap. You dare hit my brother-in-law. Perry Pang roared, his bulk quivering as he drew a rubber baton and charged. The other guards moved to surround Ian. Granny Zheng, you take old Ming inside. I'll handle this, Ian said casually, a cold smile touching his lips as he moved to meet them. A dull thud, and Perry Pang's 200-pound body was sent flying like a cannonball. A few more loud cracks, and the other 6 guards landed in a pile on top of him, a groaning heap of human limbs. Perry Pang struggled to his feet, pointing a trembling finger at Ian as he pulled out his phone. Kid, you've got guts. Just you wait. My big brother is Panther. Let's see how tough you are when he gets here. Panther. Ian couldn't help but laugh at the name. He looked at Perry with amusement. Sounds pretty tough, Mr. Gua's face turned deathly pale. He knew that Perry Pang's threat had just sealed his fate at the Sioux Group. Since Stella had been suspended, Stan and Scott had turned the company into their personal fiefdom, and an honest, old-school employee like him stood no chance. Ian saw the despair in his eyes, but said nothing. He simply sat back down and calmly opened his game. He knew the real storm was just beginning upstairs in the conference room, and after it passed, all the filth would be washed away. About 15 minutes later, the roar of several heavy motorcycles grew louder, accompanied by a black SUV that screeched to a halt at the entrance. A dozen heavily tattooed thugs swarmed out. The man in the lead, his face pockmarked, his left arm in a sling, was none other than Panther, the man Ian had taught a lesson to just days before. "Fatso, who the hell hit my brother?" Panther bellowed as he got out of the car, his voice full of an arrogance that seemed ready to tear the building down. Perry Pang scrambled over to him as if he were his savior, pointing at Ian, who was still engrossed in his phone. "Panther, it was that kid. You have to stand up for me." "Damn it, died again." Ian muttered at his screen. He then lazily looked up and waved at Panther. "Hey, kitty cat." The words kitty cat froze the entire scene. Perry Pang, his security guards, and Panther's thugs all stared in disbelief. Was this guy insane? Who dared to call Panther that to his face? Panther himself flew into a rage. "Who the hell are you calling kitty? Kit. Tot." His booming roar trailed off into a pathetic squeak as he finally got a clear look at Ian's face. His pockmarked cheeks flushed a deep, terrified red. Ian slowly stood up and walked over to him, poking a finger at his broken, plastered arm. "Feeling feisty, are we, kitty cat? It's only been a few days, and you're already back to your old tricks?" Meow. Woo. A perfect imitation of a whimper escaped the burly gangster's lips. His ferocious face was now twisted into a pathetic, pleading expression as he looked at Ian. "Panther." Perry Pang was completely bewildered. He was about to ask what was going on when Panther cut him off with a furious shout, followed by a loud slap across his fat face. "I'm hitting you," Panther hissed through gritted teeth. The man in front of him was a monster he could never afford to provoke. "You called me here to deal with him? Who else was I going to hit?" "Oh," Ian said, as if just realizing something. "I thought he was your brother. He was so arrogant, told me to kneel and apologize, and that he was going to give me 50 slaps. I guess he's not." I said 20. Perry Pang whimpered. "It was 50. I heard it clearly, mister." Gua added decisively from the side. 50 slaps. If you're short by even one, I'll give each of you 10. Panther barked at two of his largest thugs. And so, a surreal scene unfolded at the entrance of the Sioux group. Two thugs took turns, their arms swinging like windmills, delivering a relentless barrage of slaps to Perry Pang's face. And the once fearsome Panther stood by, nodding and bowing like a humble servant. After 50 slaps, Perry Pang was a bloody, swollen mess. Only then did Ian speak again. "Kitty cat, I once told you that trash belongs in a trash can." A jolt went through Panther. He immediately roared at his men. "Didn't you hear the man? Put him in the trash." Finally, with Ian's cheerful farewell of "Take care, kitty cat," Panther and his crew fled as if they had been granted a pardon, leaving the once arrogant security chief stuck and wailing in a cracked trash can. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the conference room had reached its breaking point. For Stella, every tick of the clock on the wall was a hammer blow to her heart. 9 o'clock arrived. "Stella, it's 9 o'clock. Simon was the first to attack, his voice dripping with mockery. "Where is your president, Meng? Where's the contract?" Stella's face went white. Was he really not coming? "Chairman, let's vote." Peter, Susan, and the others urged. They couldn't wait to see Stella thrown out for good. "Please, just give me 10 more minutes." Stella pleaded, making a last, desperate stand. Just as Samuel, now completely disappointed, was about to announce his decision, a thought struck him. "Stella, since you claim to have secured the investment, you must have President Meng's contact information, right?" Stella's eyes lit up. She quickly pulled out her phone. "Yes, I'll call him right now." But before she could dial, the heavy wooden door to the conference room was suddenly pushed open from the outside. A calm, powerful voice drifted in. "No need. I'm already here." Stunned, everyone turned to the door. There, a man with an extraordinary presence stood smiling. Behind him were a man and a woman, his assistants, and behind them, a panting Zhengli. "President Meng." Samuel shot up from his chair, his face a picture of pure shock and disbelief. Mason Meng smiled and walked in, his gaze sweeping the room before landing on Stella, a hint of apology in his expression. "Miss Sue, my apologies. I ran into a bit of trouble at your company's entrance, which is why I'm a few minutes late. Please forgive me." The room was utterly silent. Stan, Simon, Susan, the faces that had been so smug moments before were now frozen, their expressions a comical mixture of horror and disbelief. They couldn't fathom how the business tycoon from Stella's lies had actually, personally, appeared before them. Mason Ming's arrival was a thunderclap that shattered the tense air in the conference room. The smug smiles on the faces of Simon and Stan froze into grotesque masks of disbelief. A flash of joy crossed Samuel Sue's face, quickly followed by a pang of guilt for having doubted his granddaughter. Mason Ming's gaze swept across the room and landed on Stella, who was still in the back row. He frowned slightly, then spoke. "Who is in charge of the Sue group? We can begin." "President Ming, I am Stan Sue, the acting CEO of the Sue Group. You can discuss the contract with me. Stan immediately stood up, trying to seize this last chance. However, Mason Meng just gave a cold smile. It seems the Sue family has no sincere desire to partner with the Soaring Dragon Commerce Guild. In that case, I see no need to discuss this investment. I will withdraw my offer. With that, he actually turned to leave. Panic erupted among the Sue family. Samuel rushed to stop him. President Meng, please calm down. Where have we been lacking? Meng turned back, his voice filled with an authority that could not be challenged. I decided to make this investment for the sake of Miss Sue. But now, I find that Miss Sue holds no authority in your company. Are you looking down on my guild, or are you looking down on me, Mason Meng? His words were a revelation. Samuel understood instantly. He announced without hesitation, "It was my mistake. I hereby reinstate Stella Sue as CEO." He pointed to the CEO's chair. "Stella, you may now take your seat." Stan's face twisted in a furious snarl. "Chairman, this is against the rules. She promised 500 million, but the guild's investment cap this year is only 300. Who told you that my guild's investment decisions are limited by your assumptions?" Meng cut him off sharply, his voice like ice. "I came here today with $500 million. Struck by this final blow, Stan collapsed into his chair, speechless. Amidst a sparse round of applause, Stella returned to her rightful place, a calm smile on her face, though her heart was a raging sea. Just as everyone thought the matter was settled, and they were about to discuss the contract details, the conference room door creaked open. A lazy voice, tinged with amusement, drifted in. "Old Meng, you're driving a hard bargain." The room went still. All eyes turned to the nonchalant figure at the door. "Ian Pai? Ian Pai? Are you insane?" Walter was the first to react, slamming his hand on the table. "Old Meng." How dare he address Mason Meng so familiarly? But to everyone's astonishment, not only did Meng not get angry, he broke into a delighted smile and actually stood up. "Hee, Mr. Pai," he said, his tone almost deferential. "I was just wondering why you weren't at this meeting." "Mr. Pai, you?" The minds of the Sue family collectively short-circuited. They could not comprehend how this worthless son-in-law of theirs had earned such respect from the great Mason Meng. "A large part of the reason for this investment," Meng's voice echoed in the silent room, "is because of Mr. Pai. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't even be standing here today." His words were a bombshell that completely shattered the Sue family's understanding of reality. Samuel stared at Ian, his mind reeling, unable to form a single question. He could only follow Meng's lead and ask Ian to take a seat. Ian smiled and walked straight to Stan. "Hey, little brother-in-law," he said lazily. "How about you give me your seat?" "On what grounds?" Stan seethed. "Because you're not the acting CEO anymore." Ian's voice was quiet, but each word was a dagger. "This is a confidential business meeting. An irrelevant person like you shouldn't be here. Why don't you step out?" "Who do you think you are, telling me to get out?" Stan trembled with humiliation. But before anyone from the Sue family could react, Meng let out a cold snort. "It seems some people in the Sue family have no manners. I'm beginning to have serious concerns about this partnership." That was the final straw. Under a barrage of persuasion from his own family and the contemptuous stares of the board, a furious Stan was escorted out of the conference room. Ian then swaggered over to Stan's empty seat and sat down. He looked around at the still-standing board members and grinned. "Don't just stand there, everyone. Take a seat." In that moment, he had become the true master of the meeting. Simon Sue felt a dull ache deep in his gut. The humiliation was like a heavy stone on his chest, suffocating him, but he was powerless to act. Ian's casual takeover of the meeting was like 1,000 tiny needles pricking his pride. Samuel Sue was also struggling to contain his own displeasure. He simply could not fathom what earth-shattering secret connected his lazy, good-for-nothing son-in-law to the powerful Mason Meng. However, Mason Meng seemed oblivious to the colorful expressions on the faces of the Sue family. He looked at Ian earnestly. "Mr. Pai, when you said I was driving a hard bargain, were you referring to our proposed equity share?" "Yeah, it's a bit much," Ian confirmed without any hesitation. The members of the Sue family nearly fainted in unison. 15% equity was an incredibly generous offer, and this kid thought it was too much? What was wrong with him? "Honey." Ian ignored the others and turned to Stella, his voice filled with bravado. "You have to believe in yourself. The Sue Pharmaceutical Company will soon be the largest in the entire southern region." Stella's face flushed. The sheer audacity of his claim was embarrassing. The largest in the southern region? That was a national behemoth. Just as the family was convinced Ian had lost his mind, and even Samuel was about to reprimand him, Mason Meng nodded thoughtfully. "Mr. Pai has a point. In that case, please review this contract, Mr. Pai. We can negotiate any unreasonable terms." Now everyone was truly dumbfounded. A $500 million investment contract, and they were letting a complete amateur revise it? But Ian just waved a hand, pushing the contract toward Stella. "I won't read it. My wife can handle these things." Stella froze for a second, a faint blush on her cheeks. He was getting quite comfortable calling her his wife. She took the contract and, under the tense gaze of everyone in the room, spent a full half-hour reviewing it. She finally let out a long breath. President Meng, this contract is more than fair. The Soaring Dragon Commerce Guild has been very generous. We can sign it. Just as the family was about to breathe a sigh of relief and celebrate, Ian's voice cut in again. Wait a minute. He looked at Mason Meng lazily. Old Meng, I think you've forgotten something, haven't you? Meng paused. Then his eyes lit up in understanding. Right. The equity share does need to be adjusted. He turned to the stunned Stella. Miss Sue, my apologies, I was being thoughtless. I believe an equity share of 10% for the guild would be more appropriate. What? The room gasped. Voluntarily dropping to 10%? This wasn't just a windfall anymore. This was a mountain of gold falling from the sky. But before Stella could speak, Ian let out another scoff. Old Meng, your vision is still a little small. Simon couldn't take it anymore. You worthless freeloader. You have the nerve to say President Meng's vision is small? That's ridiculous. But this time, no one seconded him. Everyone held their breath, watching Ian. They were beginning to suspect that this seemingly absurd man might actually be capable of creating miracles. Mr. Pai, what percentage do you think would be appropriate? Mason Meng asked cautiously. Ian held up a single index finger and wagged it gently. 1%. The conference room fell into a dead silence. A stampede of wild animals seemed to thunder through the minds of Simon and the others. A $500 million investment for 1% of the company? He had to be insane. Just as the family was about to erupt and accuse Ian of sabotaging their future, Mason Meng's mind was buzzing. But after a moment, he gritted his teeth and made a decision that nearly made everyone's eyeballs pop out of their sockets. All right, we'll go with what Mr. Pai says. The Soaring Dragon Commerce Guild will take a 1% share. I think that's very reasonable. Reasonable? It was practically a gift. The Su family was completely and utterly bewildered. Their entire worldview had just been shattered by Ian Pai. The contract was quickly reprinted. The moment Stella and Mason Meng signed their names, the fate of the Su group was rewritten. The previous hostility instantly transformed into fawning praise. Sean and Larry Su and other minor board members scrambled to congratulate Stella, while Simon's face was a mask of pure, impotent rage. Thank you for your generous support, President Meng, Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. Meng glanced meaningfully at Ian and smiled. The Su group has a powerful benefactor on its side. You are destined for great things. I must be going now. Stella stood to see him out, but just as she reached the door, she turned, her eyes sweeping over everyone left in the room, her voice cool and firm. Chairman, board members, please don't leave just yet. I have a few more things I'd like to ask you all. Simon and the others, who had thought the meeting was over, felt their hearts sink. A terrible premonition instantly washed over them. Stella's words, please don't leave just yet, were like a bucket of ice water, extinguishing the newly lit flames of joy in the conference room. The air grew tense again, and every face was a mixture of speculation and unease. Simon Su's emotions were a tangled mess, his venomous gaze finally landing on Ian, who was still casually sitting in his chair, playing on his phone. Ian Pai, what are you still doing here? With Mason Meng gone, Simon's suppressed rage finally found an outlet. This is a board meeting. You're an outsider. Get out. Ian didn't even bother to look up. Why can't I be here? He asked casually. What? Are you kicking me out now that you've gotten what you wanted? He finally put his phone down, a playful mockery in his eyes. I just helped you get the equity share reduced from 15% to 1%. Is this how you treat your greatest benefactor? His words left Simon speechless, his face flushing red. The other board members exchanged glances. Although they agreed that Ian's presence was improper, they couldn't deny the truth of what he'd said. Just as Simon was about to argue further, Samuel Su spoke, his voice heavy. All right, let's wait for Stella to return. She will decide who stays and who goes. The old man's gaze lingered on Ian for a moment, his expression complex. He was finding it harder and harder to understand his son-in-law. As if on cue, Stella re-entered the room. Her expression was even more serious than before, tinged with a cold fury. The moment she sat down, a commotion could be heard from outside the room. We want to see the chairman. We want the chairman to give us justice. What is all that noise? Samuel asked, annoyed. The door was pushed open, and several figures stumbled in, supporting each other. When the board members saw who they were, a collective gasp went through the room. Leading them was the new security chief, Perry Pang, though he looked nothing like his former arrogant self. His face was wrapped so tightly in bandages that only his eyes, nose, and mouth were visible, like a poorly made mummy. Blood was still seeping through the gauze, and his head was swollen to the size of a pig's. Who did this? Simon roared, slamming his hand on the table. It was him. It was him. Perry Pang slurred, his bandaged hand trembling as he pointed at the perfectly calm Ian Pai. Ian turned with an innocent expression. That's not very nice of you. Someone else beat you up, and you're blaming me. We all saw it. It was you, another guard chimed in. Oh, you guys. Yes, I did hit you, Ian admitted freely. His tone then shifted as his gaze swept the room, finally landing on Samuel Su. But you can't blame me for that. Chairman, is it the policy of the Su group that your security guards can attack people at will, and those people aren't allowed to fight back? Under Samuel's stern questioning, Ian calmly recounted the events at the entrance. He described how Mason Meng had been unreasonably blocked, how he had stepped in for the good of the company, how the guards had initiated the violence, and how he had been forced to defend himself. He ended his story with a mischievous smile. And this mighty pig-headed captain, seeing that his own men couldn't handle me, called his big brother for backup. But his big brother didn't hit me. Instead, he grabbed this guy and beat him senseless. And that's how he ended up like this. His words were more humiliating for Perry Pang than another beating would have been. Samuel and Stella's faces grew darker as they listened, finally understanding what Meng had meant by a small problem. Samuel snorted. Who is the head of security? Have him come here and explain. Stella immediately called the former head, Ron Lowe, and put him on speaker. When Ron's indignant voice came through the phone. If you have questions, you should ask the newly appointed head, Scott Su. The air in the room froze. Scott's face instantly went pale. Under Stella's cold questioning, Scott tried to lie his way out of it, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. But when the old guard, Mr. Gua, was brought in and recounted exactly how Perry Pang and Shanxia had deliberately caused trouble, claiming they only recognized the new CEO's secretary, all of Scott's excuses fell apart. These people aren't being honest, Ian's lazy voice piped up again. Honey, maliciously obstructing a business partner and nearly causing a huge loss for the company. Isn't that something we can call the police about? A few months in jail should straighten them out, right? Zheng Li, call the police, Stella said, taking his cue. Don't call the police. Perry Pang and the others broke down completely. Faced with the fear of going to jail, all loyalty and pretense vanished. He confessed everything. It was all Head Scott's idea. He told us to stop all outsiders. And it was young Master Stan who told us to interrupt the board meeting. The truth was out. Samuel trembled with rage. He slammed his hand on the table. Unbelievable. He immediately fired Scott from all his positions in the company and demoted Stan to a junior position in the marketing department. As for Perry Pang and his crew, they were fired on the spot. After a tumultuous meeting, the Su family members finally left, greatly relieved. In the CEO's office, Stella frowned at the mess Stan had left behind. Zheng Li was busy cleaning up, while Ian was sprawled on the sofa, as if he didn't have a bone in his body. He looked at the woman who had just demonstrated such decisive power in the meeting, a lazy smile on his lips. So, did CEO Su call me to her office to give me a reward?